John Miller walked quickly through the busy hallways of the television studio where The View was filmed. He carried a stack of papers and a coffee that was still too hot to drink. As a junior producer for the show, John was always one of the first to arrive and one of the last to leave. Today was going to be special. He could feel it. The morning production meeting was about to start. These meetings happened every day at 7:30 a.m. The hosts and producers would talk about what topics they would cover on the show. They would also talk about which guests were coming and what questions to ask them. John entered the main conference room. Several people were already there. Nancy Clark, the executive producer, sat at the head of the table. She was typing something on her phone. Nancy had worked in television for 20 years. She knew how to create moments that people would talk about. "Good morning, everyone," Nancy said without looking up from her phone. "We have a lot to cover today." The room filled up as more staff members arrived. Joy Behar, one of the main hosts of The View, walked in last. She wore a bright red jacket and large glasses. Joy had been on the show for many years. She was known for speaking her mind and not backing down from arguments. "Sorry I'm late," Joy said as she sat down. "Traffic was terrible." Nancy nodded and began the meeting. They talked about regular show business for about 10 minutes. Then Nancy looked at Joy with a small smile. "I have something interesting to share," Nancy said. She pulled out a folder and slid it across the table to Joy. "This came to us late last night from a trusted source." Joy opened the folder. Inside was what looked like a printed email. The name at the top of the email said, Kash Patel. "Is this real?" Joy asked, her eyes getting wider as she read. "Our source says it is," Nancy replied. "And it couldn't have come at a better time. Kash Patel will be on our show tomorrow to talk about his new book." Kash Patel had worked in the Defense Department. He had written a book about his time in government. Many people had strong opinions about him. Some people thought he was a hero. Others thought he had done bad things. "This email makes him look very bad," Joy said, still reading. "If he really wrote this..." Kevin Walsh, an assistant producer with glasses and a serious face, spoke up from the other side of the table. "Shouldn't we check if it's real first? We could get in trouble if we use a fake email on the show." Nancy waved her hand as if swatting away a fly. "Our source is reliable. We don't have time for a full investigation before tomorrow's show." "I think Kevin has a point," John said quietly. "Maybe we should at least try to confirm some details." Joy looked up from the email. "This is exactly the kind of thing our viewers expect from us. They want us to ask the hard questions that other shows are afraid to ask." "Exactly," Nancy agreed. "And this is perfect for ratings. People love it when we catch guests in lies." Kevin didn't look happy, but he stopped arguing. John made a note in his notebook to do some quick research on his own. He wasn't comfortable with using information they hadn't checked. "So here's what we'll do," Nancy continued. She explained her plan to everyone in the room. "We'll let him talk about his book for a few minutes, get him comfortable. Then Joy will bring up the email as if we just received it. I'll read parts of it and watch his reaction," Joy said with excitement in her voice. "He won't be expecting this at all." "Should we tell the other hosts about this plan?" John asked. Nancy thought for a moment. "Let's tell Susan and Patricia right before the show. We want their surprise to look real too." The meeting continued for another half hour. They talked about other segments for tomorrow's show, but everyone kept coming back to the Kash Patel interview. It was clear this would be the main event. After the meeting, John went to his small desk in the corner of the production office. He opened his laptop and started searching for information about Kash Patel. He wanted to learn more about the topics mentioned in the email. As he researched, he found some things that didn't match what the email said. The dates seemed wrong. Some of the people mentioned didn't work together at the times described in the email. John printed out his findings and walked to Nancy's office. Her door was open, but she was on the phone. He waited outside until she finished her call. "Nancy, I found some problems with the email," John said as he entered her office. He put his papers on her desk. "Some of these details don't add up." Nancy glanced at the papers but didn't pick them up. John, I appreciate your work, but we don't have time for this. The show is tomorrow morning. But what if the email is fake? We could get sued. Nancy sighed. Look, our legal team reviewed it. They said as long as we present it as allegedly from Patel, we're covered. We're not saying it's definitely real. We're just asking for his response. John wasn't satisfied with this answer, but he could tell Nancy had made up her mind. He took his papers and left her office. Later that day, John watched as the staff prepared the studio for tomorrow's show. The set designers arranged the furniture. The lighting crew adjusted the lights. Everything had to look perfect. Joy was sitting on the couch, reading through the email again. She was making notes on a separate piece of paper. John could see she was practicing how she would present the email on the show. Do you think he'll deny it? Joy asked when she noticed John watching her. I don't know, John replied honestly. But I think we should be careful. Some things in that email don't seem right to me. Joy frowned. You sound like Kevin now. Don't you want to hold powerful people accountable? Of course I do, John said, but I also want to be sure we have the facts straight. Joy went back to her notes. Trust me, this is going to be the moment everyone talks about tomorrow. I can feel it. As the day went on, more and more people heard about the plan. The makeup artists, camera operators, and other staff whispered about it when they thought no one important was listening. Everyone was excited to see what would happen. By the end of the day, John still felt uneasy. He tried one more time to talk to Nancy about his concerns, but she was too busy to listen. The plan was set. Tomorrow, Joy would surprise Kash Patel with the email. As John left the studio that evening, he wondered how Patel would react. Would he get angry? Would he deny everything? Or would something unexpected happen? John didn't know it yet, but tomorrow's show would not go the way anyone planned. The trap that Joy and Nancy thought they were setting would turn out very differently, and it would all unfold live on national television for everyone to see. The morning of the show arrived with clear skies and a cool breeze. Kash Patel woke up early in his hotel room. He had a routine before television appearances. First, he would go for a short run. Then he would review his talking points about his new book. Finally, he would pick out a suit that looked good on camera. Today, he chose a navy blue suit with a red tie. Kash ate a light breakfast in his room while watching the morning news. He felt ready for his appearance on The View. He had been on many television shows before. Some hosts were friendly to him, others were not. He knew The View might be tough, but he believed he could handle their questions. At the same time, the staff of The View was already busy at the studio. They arrived hours before the show would start. Camera operators checked their equipment. Makeup artists prepared their stations. Production assistants ran around with coffee and papers. Lisa Brown stood by the studio entrance. She was a production assistant whose job was to greet guests and take them to the green room. Lisa had worked at The View for 2 years. She liked meeting famous people, but today she felt nervous. Everyone was talking about the plan to surprise Kash Patel with the email. Do you think he'll get mad? Lisa asked John Miller as they waited near the entrance. John shrugged. I don't know. I still think we should have checked the email more carefully. Nancy says it's real, Lisa said, and Joy seems excited about using it. John didn't answer. He was still worried about what might happen. At 8:30 a.m., a black car pulled up outside the studio. Kash Patel stepped out and walked toward the entrance. He smiled when he saw Lisa waiting for him. Good morning, Kash said. I'm here for the show. Good morning, Mr. Patel, Lisa replied with a professional smile. Welcome to The View. Please follow me to the green room. We have about an hour before you go on air. Lisa led Kash through the hallways of the studio. She tried to act normal, but she kept thinking about the email and what would happen later. Kash didn't seem to notice her nervousness. He chatted with her about the weather and asked questions about how long she had worked at the show. In the green room, Kash found a comfortable chair and a table with water, coffee, and small snacks. The walls were painted a light green color. A television on the wall showed what was happening on the set. Someone will come get you when it's time for hair and makeup, Lisa explained. Is there anything you need while you wait? No, thank you, Kash replied. I'm all set. Lisa left the green room and hurried to find Nancy Clark. The executive producer was in her office looking at her phone. Mr. Patel is here, Lisa told her. He's in the green room now. Nancy looked up from her phone. How does he seem? Nervous? Suspicious? He seems normal, Lisa said. Very polite. I don't think he knows about the email. Nancy smiled. Perfect. Let's keep it that way until Joy brings it up on air. While Kash waited in the green room, Joy Behar was meeting with co-hosts Susan Martin and Patricia Williams. The three women sat in a small room near the set. Joy held the folder with the printed email. I have something big to share, Joy told them. She opened the folder and showed them the email. We're going to surprise Patel with this during his segment. Susan and Patricia read the email with wide eyes. Wow, Susan said. This makes him look really bad. Are we sure it's real? Nancy says it is, Joy replied. I'm going to read parts of it and watch his reaction. It's going to be great television. Patricia looked unsure. Shouldn't we have told him beforehand that we have this? It seems a bit unfair to surprise him. Joy shook her head. If we tell him early, he'll have time to come up with excuses. We want his real, unplanned reaction. Susan and Patricia didn't argue further. They trusted Joy and Nancy to know what was best for the show. Meanwhile, Daniel Garcia was working in the research department. Daniel was a fact-checker for The View. His job was to make sure the information used on the show was correct. John Miller had shared his concerns about the email with Daniel the day before. Daniel had spent hours trying to verify the email. He had looked at news reports, public records, and social media posts. He had found several problems with the email, just like John had. The dates didn't match known events. Some of the people mentioned in the email didn't work together at the times described. Daniel printed his findings and went to find Nancy. He knocked on her office door, but she wasn't there. He tried calling her phone, but she didn't answer. The show would start soon and he needed to tell someone about what he had found. He decided to look for Joy instead. He walked quickly to the host's preparation area, but a security guard stopped him. Sorry, no interruptions right now, the guard said. They're going over final notes before the show. But this is important, Daniel insisted. It's about the Kash Patel segment. The guard shook his head. You can talk to them after the first commercial break. Those are the rules. Daniel went back to his desk, frustrated. He would have to wait. At 9:30 a.m., a makeup artist named Carol Peters went to the green room to get Kash ready for the show. She led him to the makeup area and had him sit in a high chair in front of a large mirror. We just need to put a little powder on you, Carol explained as she worked. The studio lights are very bright, and this helps prevent shine. Kash nodded.
He had done this many times before.
As Carol applied the makeup, she tried not to think about the plan with the email. She focused on doing her job well. Are you nervous about being on the show? Carol asked, making small talk. Not really, Kash replied. I've been on television, a lot. I'm used to tough questions, Carol thought to herself. You don't know what's coming today. But she just smiled and continued working. At 9:45 a.m., the audience was seated in the studio. The energy was high as people waited for the show to begin. Many in the audience didn't know about the plan with the email. They were just excited to see the hosts and guests in person. Backstage, the production team made final preparations. Camera operators checked their positions. Sound technicians tested the microphones. Stage managers reviewed their cue cards. Frank Johnson, the lead stage manager, gathered everyone for a quick meeting. Remember, after the first segment, we'll have a commercial break, Frank explained. Then we'll bring out Kash Patel. Joy will lead that interview. Everyone needs to be ready for anything. It might get intense. The team nodded. They all knew about the email plan now. Some looked excited, others seemed worried. At 9:55 a.m., a production assistant went to get Kash from the makeup area. It was almost time for the show to start. The assistant led Kash to the waiting area just off stage. You'll go on after the first commercial break, the assistant told him. You can watch the first segment on this monitor. Kash thanked the assistant. and turned his attention to the monitor. He could see the hosts taking their places at the table on set. The audience was applauding. The clock showed 10 a.m. The show's theme music played. The cameras went live. The View was on the air, and in less than 15 minutes, Kash Patel would walk onto the set, unaware of what Joy Behar had planned for him. The first segment of The View went smoothly. The hosts talked about a popular movie that had just come out. They also discussed a news story about a famous singer. The audience laughed at their jokes and clapped at their comments. Everything seemed normal, but behind the scenes, people were getting ready for what would happen next. Samantha Wright, one of the regular hosts of the show, did not know about the email. Nancy and Joy had decided not to tell her. They wanted her reactions to be real when Joy brought up the email during Kash Patel's interview. As the first segment ended, Frank Johnson counted down to the commercial break. "And we're clear," he called out when the cameras stopped filming. 4 minutes until we're back." The hosts got up from their table. Makeup artists rushed over to touch up their faces. Production assistants brought them fresh water. Joy Behar seemed more excited than usual. She kept looking at the folder on the table that contained the printed email. "Are you ready for this?" Susan Martin whispered to Joy. Joy nodded with a smile. "More than ready. This is going to be good." Backstage, a production assistant approached Kash Patel. "Mr. Patel, we'll be bringing you out after this commercial break. Please follow me to the side of the stage." Kash stood up and straightened his tie. He picked up his book from the table next to him. His publisher had told him to make sure the book was visible during the interview. Kash followed the assistant to the edge of the stage and waited for his cue. Daniel Garcia, the fact-checker, was still trying to talk to someone about the problems he had found with the email. He spotted John Miller standing near the control room. "John, I need to talk to Nancy or Joy," Daniel said quickly. "This email has serious issues. The timeline doesn't make sense. Some of the people mentioned couldn't have been in those meetings." John looked worried. "I know. I tried to tell them yesterday, but they wouldn't listen. It's too late now. The segment is about to start." Daniel ran his hand through his hair in frustration. "This could be really bad for the show if we use fake information." On the set, the hosts returned to their table. The audience settled back into their seats after the break. Frank Johnson began the countdown. "Going live in 5, 4, 3, 2. He pointed silently at the hosts to signal they were on air. Samantha Wright smiled at the camera. "Welcome back to The View. Our next guest is a former Defense Department official who has just written a new book about his time in government. Please welcome Kash Patel." The audience applauded as Kash walked onto the stage. He smiled and waved at the audience. He shook hands with each of the hosts before sitting down in the guest chair. He placed his book on the small table next to him, making sure the cover was facing the camera. "Thank you for having me," Kash said. "Thank you for being here," Samantha replied. "Let's talk about your new book. What made you decide to write it?" Kash relaxed a little. This was an easy question, one he had answered many times. "Well, I felt it was important for people to understand what really happens inside the government. There are a lot of misconceptions, and I wanted to set the record straight based on my experience." Samantha nodded. "You worked in several different positions in the government. Can you tell us about some of those roles?" As Kash started to explain his career, Joy Behar watched him closely. She was waiting for the right moment to bring up the email. She had the folder open in front of her, but Kash couldn't see what was inside from where he was sitting. The interview continued smoothly for about 5 minutes. Kash talked about his book and answered questions about his time in government. The hosts asked some challenging questions, but nothing unusual or unexpected. Kash seemed comfortable and spoke confidently about his experiences. In the control room, Nancy Clark watched the monitors with a satisfied expression. Everything was going according to plan. Kash had no idea what was coming. She glanced at her watch. It was almost time for Joy to make her move. Back on the set, Joy cleared her throat. Samantha had just finished asking a question about a chapter in Kash's book. As soon as Kash finished his answer, Joy jumped in. "Kash, I'd like to change direction a bit," Joy said. Her tone had changed. It was more serious now. Your book talks about integrity and transparency in government. Those are important values, wouldn't you agree? Kash nodded, looking slightly confused at the sudden change in topic. Yes, absolutely. Those are core values that every government official should uphold. Joy leaned forward slightly. So you believe in being honest and transparent? Of course, Kash replied. That's a big part of why I wrote this book. Joy picked up the folder from the table. Well, that's interesting because we've obtained an email that you allegedly wrote. I'd like to get your response to it, the audience murmured. They could feel that something big was happening. Susan and Patricia watched with anticipation. Samantha looked surprised since she hadn't known about this plan. Behind the cameras, Frank Johnson watched tensely. He touched his headset and heard Nancy's voice. Stay on Joy and Kash. Get their reactions. Kash's expression changed slightly, but he remained calm. What email are you referring to? Joy held up the printed paper from the folder. This is an email that our sources say you wrote last year. It contains some very concerning statements that seem to contradict what you've been saying in your book and in this interview. The camera zoomed in on Kash's face. He didn't look nervous or guilty. He just looked confused. May I see it? Kash asked. First, I'd like to read some parts of it, Joy replied. She began to read from the paper. Regarding the situation we discussed, I believe we should proceed with the original plan despite the legal concerns. As Joy read, Daniel Garcia burst into the control room. He was out of breath from running. Nancy, we need to stop this, he said urgently. That email can't be real. The date on it is a Sunday, but the government offices mentioned would have been closed, and the person it's addressed to didn't work there at that time. Nancy turned to him with an angry expression. You can't be in here during a live broadcast. Get out now. But the email, out. Nancy pointed to the door. A security guard stepped forward and escorted Daniel from the room. On the set, Joy continued, reading from the email. We can address any questions about legality after the fact. What matters now is getting results, not following bureaucratic rules that only slow us down. The audience gasped. This sounded bad. Joy looked up at Kash with a triumphant expression, as if she had caught him in a lie. But Kash still didn't look worried. He was listening carefully, his head slightly tilted as if trying to understand something. Joy continued reading more from the email. She was only partway through it, but she already felt like she had made her point. The email made Kash sound like someone who didn't care about rules or laws. Behind the scenes, John Miller watched with growing concern. He knew from his research that there were problems with this email. He wondered how Kash would respond. Carol Peters, the makeup artist, stood nearby watching a monitor. This doesn't feel right, she whispered to another staff member, ambushing a guest like this. On the set, Joy was still reading. She was now getting to the middle part of the email. The concerns raised by the legal team are noted but not relevant to our current objectives. We have authorization from the highest levels to... Joy paused and looked up at Kash again. Care to explain this? Kash looked at her calmly. Please, continue reading the entire email. I'd like to hear all of it before I respond. Joy seemed surprised by his calm reaction. She had expected him to get defensive or angry. Instead, he wanted her to keep reading. She glanced at Nancy, who was watching from off stage. Nancy nodded slightly, signaling Joy to continue. All right, Joy said, looking back at the paper. She would read more of the email after the next commercial break. The trap was set, but something didn't feel quite right. Why wasn't Kash panicking? The commercial break gave everyone a chance to catch their breath. The tension on the set was high. Joy Behar sat at the table, still holding the printed email. She looked at Kash Patel, who remained calm in his chair. He didn't seem worried at all, which confused Joy. Are we doing the right thing? Susan Martin whispered to Joy during the break. He doesn't seem guilty. Trust me, Joy replied quietly. The email speaks for itself. Let's see how he explains it. Across the set, Samantha Wright was talking to a producer. She looked upset. "Why didn't anyone tell me about this email?" she asked. "I don't like being surprised during a live show." The producer tried to calm her down. "Nancy thought it would be better if your reactions were genuine. We'll talk about it after the show." In the control room, Nancy Clark watched the monitors with a focused expression. The segment was going as planned, but Kash's calm reaction worried her. She had expected him to get defensive or angry. Instead, he wanted Joy to read the entire email. Nancy wondered if they had made a mistake. Alan Schmidt, the director, sat next to Nancy. He could feel the tension in the room. "This is getting intense," he said. "Should we cut the segment short if things get too heated?" Nancy shook her head. "No, let it play out. This is good television." Outside the control room, John Miller and Daniel Garcia were talking in hushed voices. "We need to stop this," Daniel said. "That email has too many problems." "It's too late," John replied. "They're already halfway through it. All we can do now is watch." Frank Johnson's voice came through their headsets. "1 minute until we're back on air." Everyone to their positions. The makeup artists rushed to touch up the hosts' faces. Production assistants made sure water glasses were full. The audience settled back into their seats after the break. Going live in 5, 4, 3, 2. Frank counted down and then pointed silently at the hosts. Joy Behar looked directly at the camera. "Welcome back to The View. Before the break, we were discussing an email allegedly written by our guest, Kash Patel. I'll continue reading from it now." The cameras zoomed in on Kash, who sat with his hands folded in his lap. He nodded slightly, encouraging Joy to continue. Joy looked back at the printed email and started reading again. "We have authorization from the highest levels to proceed with this operation. However, I want to make one thing absolutely clear to everyone on this email chain." Joy paused for effect before continuing. "Under no circumstances are we to violate any laws or regulations. I repeat, we must follow all legal requirements without exception." Joy's voice faltered slightly. This part of the email didn't sound as bad as the beginning, but she continued reading. "The previous suggestions about bypassing legal review were not approved and should not be followed. Anyone who proceeds without proper legal clearance will be removed from the project immediately." Joy looked confused now. The email was taking an unexpected turn. She glanced at Nancy off camera, but Nancy motioned for her to keep reading. "The rules and laws exist for a reason, and we will follow them to the letter," Joy continued. "What I meant by my earlier comment about bureaucratic rules was only that we should find efficient ways to work within the system, not that we should ignore the system." The audience was quiet now. They had expected something scandalous, but the email was starting to sound reasonable. Joy's voice grew less confident as she read on. "Please forward this email to everyone on your teams. I want complete clarity on this point. We achieve our objectives legally or not at all. The ends do not justify the means if the means are illegal or unethical." Joy paused again, looking increasingly uncomfortable. She looked at Kash, who was listening with a slight smile now. "Please finish it," Kash said calmly. "There's a bit more." Joy cleared her throat and continued reading. "Finally, I've scheduled a meeting with the legal team for Monday to review all aspects of this operation. Everyone must attend. No exceptions. We will address all concerns raised and ensure we are in full compliance with all applicable laws and regulations. Regards, Kash Patel." Joy put the paper down slowly. The email, when read in full, was actually about insisting on following the law, not breaking it. The part she had read at the beginning, taken out of context, had sounded bad, but the complete email showed the opposite of what Joy and Nancy had thought. The studio was silent. Even the audience seemed confused by what had just happened. Susan and Patricia exchanged uncomfortable looks. Samantha stared at Joy with a surprised expression. Kash broke the silence. "Thank you for reading the entire email," he said politely. "As you can see, that email was actually me responding to someone else's suggestion to bypass legal review. I was making it absolutely clear that we would not do that under any circumstances." Joy struggled to find words. This was not how the segment was supposed to go. But the beginning of the email suggested, "The beginning might sound ambiguous when taken out of context," Kash interrupted gently. "That's why it's important to read the whole thing. I was addressing someone else's idea and firmly rejecting it." In the control room, Nancy Clark put her head in her hands. "This is a disaster," she whispered. The email that was supposed to trap Kash had instead made him look good. He appeared to be exactly what he claimed in his book, someone who insisted on following the law. Alan Schmidt looked at Nancy. "Should we cut to commercial?" Nancy shook her head. "No, that would make it worse. Let it play out." Back on the set, Kash continued speaking. "I'm curious, though. Where did you get this email? It was sent on a secure government system to a limited group of people." Joy looked uncomfortable. Our sources provided it to us." "Well, I'm glad they did," Kash said with a smile. "It perfectly illustrates what my book is about, the importance of integrity in government. I wrote that email because someone suggested taking shortcuts, and I wanted to make it absolutely clear that we would not do that." The audience began to murmur. Some people even started to applaud Kash's response. He had turned the ambush completely around. Samantha Wright, trying to salvage the segment, jumped in with a new question. "Let's talk more about your book. You mentioned the challenges of working in a high-pressure environment. Can you tell us about that?" As Kash began answering Samantha's question, Joy sat back in her chair, still holding the printed email. She looked stunned by what had happened. The trap she had set had backfired completely. In the back of the studio, John Miller couldn't help smiling a little. He had tried to warn them about the email, and now they could see he was right. Daniel Garcia stood next to him, shaking his head. "I tried to tell them," Daniel said quietly. "Sometimes people only learn the hard way," John replied. As the segment continued, the mood on set had completely changed. What was supposed to be a gotcha moment had turned into a vindication of Kash Patel, and it had all happened live on national television. The rest of Kash Patel's interview on The View went smoothly, but it was not what the show's producers had planned. Instead of catching Kash in a scandal, they had accidentally helped him look good. He answered the remaining questions with confidence. When the segment ended, the audience gave him a warm round of applause. As soon as the show cut to commercial, Nancy Clark rushed onto the set. Her face was red with anger. "What happened?" she demanded, looking at Joy Behar. "You were supposed to read only the beginning of the email." Joy shook her head. "He asked me to read the whole thing. What was I supposed to do? Refuse on live television? That would have looked worse." "We should have checked the entire email more carefully," Samantha Wright said. She was still upset that no one had told her about the plan beforehand. Nancy turned to a nearby production assistant. "Make sure Mr. Patel leaves the building right away. No press interviews. No talking to the audience." But it was too late. Kash Patel was already shaking hands with audience members who had approached the stage. People were asking him to sign copies of his book. He looked happy and relaxed, while the hosts and producers looked stressed and confused. Eric Taylor, another producer, joined Nancy and the hosts. "We need an emergency meeting right now," he said quietly. "This is going to be all over the news by lunch." The hosts followed Nancy and Eric to a conference room backstage. The mood was grim. What should have been a big win for the show had turned into an embarrassing mistake. "How did this happen?" Eric asked once everyone was seated. "Who verified this email?" Nancy shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Our source is usually reliable. We had no reason to doubt them." "Daniel and John tried to warn us," Joy admitted. "They found problems with the email yesterday, but we didn't listen." Eric ran his hands through his hair in frustration. "So we ambushed a guest on live television with an email that actually made him look good instead of bad. This is a disaster." While the emergency meeting continued backstage, John Miller watched Kash Patel leave the studio. Kash was smiling and chatting with his publicist. His book was tucked under his arm. The whole incident had worked out well for him. "Mr. Patel," John called out as Kash walked by. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry about what happened today." Kash stopped and looked at John. No need to apologize. These things happen in television. I tried to tell them the email needed more checking, John said. I found some problems with it yesterday. Kash nodded. I appreciate that. Not everyone would have tried to do the right thing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. If you ever need a job, give me a call. I could use someone with integrity on my team. John took the card, surprised by the offer. Thank you, sir. As Kash left the building, reporters were already gathering outside. News of what had happened on The View was spreading quickly on social media. People were sharing clips of joy, reading the email and Kash's calm response. Back in the conference room, the emergency meeting was getting heated. Patricia Williams was arguing with Nancy Clark. We damaged our credibility today, Patricia said. We need to issue an apology. Absolutely not, Nancy replied firmly. We don't apologize for asking tough questions. That's what our show is known for. But we didn't just ask tough questions, Susan Martin pointed out. We tried to trap a guest with an email that we didn't properly verify, and it backfired. Joy Behar sat quietly, still processing what had happened. She had been so sure the email would be a bombshell moment. Instead, it had made her look foolish on live television. What do we do now? Joy finally asked. Eric Taylor sighed. We need to control the damage. We'll put out a statement saying we were given information that we presented to Mr. Patel for his response, which is exactly what happened. We won't apologize, but we won't make things worse either. No one looked happy with this plan, but no, one had a better idea. Meanwhile, Barbara Taylor, a reporter for a competing network, was already working on a story about the incident. She sat at her desk, watching the clip from The View again. This is perfect, she said to her producer. A classic case of a gotcha moment that completely backfired. Her producer nodded. What's your angle? I'm going to focus on how this shows the dangers of not verifying information properly, Barbara replied, and how Patel handled it perfectly. He didn't get angry or defensive, he just let the full email speak for itself. The producer smiled. People are going to eat this up. The ratings for our evening show will be great. At his hotel, Kash Patel was on the phone with his publisher. The publisher was ecstatic. This is the best publicity we could have hoped for, the publisher exclaimed. Pre-orders for your book have tripled in the last hour. We're going to need to print more copies right away. Kash smiled. I guess I should thank Joy Behar for reading the whole email. You handled it perfectly, the publisher said. Not getting angry or defensive was exactly the right move. You came across as reasonable and honest. Later that afternoon, The View released a brief statement. On today's show, we presented information to our guest, Kash Patel, and gave him the opportunity to respond. We will continue to ask tough questions of all our guests. The statement didn't mention the email specifically and didn't include an apology. Many people online criticized the show for not taking responsibility for their mistake. That evening, Barbara Taylor's report aired on the competing network. In what appears to be an attempt to create a gotcha moment, she explained, Joy Behar inadvertently helped Kash Patel by reading an email that, in its complete form, supported his version of events rather than undermining it. The report included clips from the show and interviews with media experts who discussed the importance of verifying information before using it on air. The story quickly became one of the most watched segments of the evening. The next morning, John Miller arrived at the studio early. He wasn't sure what to expect after yesterday's disaster. Would he be blamed for not being more insistent about the problems with the email? Or would Nancy and Joy finally recognize that he had been right? As he walked to his desk, he saw Daniel Garcia already there. Daniel looked up and gave him a tired smile. Rough day yesterday, Daniel said. I heard. The ratings were through the roof, though. Everyone loves to watch a plan backfire. John nodded. I guess that's something. Have you seen Nancy or Joy yet? No, Daniel replied. But there's a staff meeting in an hour. I'm sure they'll have something to say. John sat down at his desk and turned on his computer. His email inbox was full of messages about yesterday's show. Everyone in the media industry was talking about what had happened. As he scrolled through the emails, he noticed one from Kash Patel. The subject line said simply, "Thank you." John opened it and read, "Thank you for trying to do the right thing yesterday. My offer still stands. If you ever want to work somewhere that values integrity, let me know. Kash." John stared at the email for a long moment. Then he looked around at the busy office of The View. People were rushing about, already preparing for today's show as if nothing had happened yesterday. He thought about Kash's offer. Then he opened a new document on his computer and began typing his resignation letter. Sometimes, he realized, you had to stand up for what was right, even if it meant making a big change. As he typed, the morning news played on a nearby television. The top story was still about what had happened on The View yesterday. Kash Patel's book was now #1 on the bestseller list. All because Joy Behar had read an entire email on live television, not realizing that the full context would change everything.